The workshop was very overdue for a sort out, so I started sorting and I discovered our hedgehog. Now we took this hedgehog, if indeed it is the same one, we took it down to the woods around the corner quite a few weeks back and thought it had gone, but then we've seen a few signs of it possibly being around, and there it was under here. And this got me thinking, why don't I show you the other strange sort of undiscovered things that have been lying around the workshop for ages. The first thing is this old Shepak mitre saw / table saw. My first apprentice was so afraid of it he refused to use it. I did find it quite helpful though, apart from the fact that it was never wide enough to cut anything useful. It always sort of got jammed on the top of a skirting if you're trying to cut through the skirting. I would scribe things as if playing snooker with them, just feed them through, and it wasn't a bad method, to be honest, but it did mean dust went everywhere. The second biggest unused thing, and it's a tragedy it's so unused really, is this very nice record lathe. It's all working and everything, electronic control, decent headstock. Since having a family I just never found the time to mess around with it the way I thought, but haven't been able to let it go. And if we look up here, we have the old Erlex pathetic little spray system, the Erlex spray station. It's a turbine that never really seemed worthwhile to me, because I mean I tried it with the Leyland paints we used to spray and it just couldn't really cope with the thickness, and then you had to thin them way beyond the recommendation. But it got us messing around with spraying and starting to get familiar with it. So it's not just the older tools that I was thinking of. There's an old wrap of auger bits and the like. This is a fantastic knife from when I used to work with Swedish people in Romania, and they all had knives like these. It seemed to be a standard thing for a builder to have. You can get variations that have a chisel tip. That, I believe, is a very old carpet fitter's knife. This is an old spoke shave. I love using these. Very simple that. You just adjust the cut depth by tapping these with a hammer. This is a very well made drill. I'm sure there'll be lots of people watching this that will correct me and inform me of the correct names for things. Now this mallet is good for fine carving work. There's a nice old plane, that's a rebating plane. Oops. Nothing wrong with that, could be sharpened up. We just use a router instead. Nice big chisel. Some of these I inherited from an old chap down the road who I made a gate for and some other things. And he didn't have any kids, and he very touchingly, when he passed away, left me a lot of tools. A type of moulding plane, or maybe that might just be, I think it's just a grooving plane actually. Now this one, quite interesting. I think somebody's used an old, yes, I think it's an old jigsaw blade that they have shaped. So it just pokes through there. It's been ground and shaped just to score a bead, so you could push that along the edge of a piece of wood and just slowly sort of scrape away whatever profile you've placed here, which you can clamp in by loosening that off, and then you can set the position away from the edge of the board with that screw. Now here we've got some proper old-fashioned mortising chisels. So they're very parallel in that direction, and that nice thickness in that direction helps to clear the waste. I saw someone use these properly and was quite impressed at how quickly you can, with training, chop into a mortise with a proper old traditional mortise chisel. So they come in different widths. And now here's a moulding plane. So again, somewhat defunct because of the router, and I've always had romantic ideas of using these tools, but probably when I'm retired and actually have the time, I'd enjoy it. bit of mildew on that. I'll clean off. Lovely little plane. Now this is not so old as some of them. I'm guessing that's maybe from the 70s. That's a lino cutter, and so you can more easily just cut through and keep both faces either side flush to each other. Now this is a draw knife, so both of those would come out. You'd hold them two-handed and you'd draw towards you just to shave the edges off something. Again, if you know more about that sort of thing, then let us know. That's made in America. Now here's a nice gauge. This is for marking mortises. So you can set your mortise width between those two scoring wheels, and then set your width off the edge of the board. These are the drill bits. These are the drill bits that go in that nice old drill. Yes, so those drill bits would go in there. You see that holds the rectangular tapered section at the end. You would use that. I'm pretty sure it's made for that drill. Oh, of course, I know why. I know what it is. It's a screwdriver, isn't it? Yeah, it's just a flathead screwdriver. Now here's a shape of drill that I don't think you'd be able to buy at Screwfix these days. That is a drill, and it will gouge out as it goes. Now this is just an angle guide, most likely made by whichever old woodworker owned it at the time, I would imagine. I wonder if that's teak, possibly teak. So these are two other moulding planes, metal spoke shave with adjustment. When I have used them, I must say I enjoyed the feel of the wooden ones better. I have dabbled with carving, and it's something I enjoy very much and intend to go back to. As you can see, I must have picked some of these up from tool shops. Probably the tool shop in Newport, Pembrokeshire, that I always like to visit whenever we go there. That's a Marples one, made in Sheffield. This nice old spoke shave is also made in Sheffield. Now there are things old and new in here. This is something I picked up in America, so that's for sharpening gouges and V-gouges, etc. A nice long plane made out of beech. It's very good hardwood for the purpose. Obviously not actually all that old. Made in West Germany, it's interesting. Dovetail saw actually. Gentleman's saw perhaps is finer even than that. Couldn't think what these were at first, but they're the different blades that can go in the planer that I showed you early on. They would fit down that angled hole with that poking out the top, and they'd be cutting that way. Don't worry, we'll find you a home. Someone's going to come get you soon. Now we do have a fantastic old Wadkin planer thicknesser here, just decommissioned because it doesn't have a braking system, and Health and Safety Executive isn't happy about any tool that doesn't stop within 10 seconds of you hitting the stop button. Now this is the pullout that has been officially labelled as tools we hardly use. That's newer. This is a pretty good belt sander, but we don't often need a belt sander. What we do use it for, as you can see from the base being permanently mounted on it, is just occasional work where maybe we need to round off the end of something. This is a little old stabular level. Yes, I remember being excited to get a laser level when I first got this. So you put two screws or nails in the wall, and those slots there will allow you just to slot it on, and that would project from the wall at whatever height you've fitted the screws, and that's your base then. onto which you place your tripod-like level and adjust it manually to level until your bubbles go level, and same that side of course. What you actually have is a reflector, a 90-degree reflector there, which seems to be missing. It would have sat in there, and it magnetically goes on here. The laser's coming up here, then it gets reflected out to 90 degrees, and you have to manually turn that. So you can point it somewhere, mark, turn it, mark again. There's a car jack in there that I intended to rig up to create a router lift, but never did, never really quite saw the need. Old pocket hole jig, not Craig. It's an alright little thing. Just don't use it. Different vices. We do occasionally get this vice out on its base for holding something metal that we need to cut. And this is a thing that you can mount. You can mount a drill in, create a sort of a pillar drill. But being from Machine Mart, the Clark brand, it was very wobbly and imprecise. Little router picked up from Tony's tool den. Dremel. Do sometimes use a Dremel for odds and ends. It's useful to have. Now this, I think, is, yes, it's a bead lock. The principle was this screws to that in different positions. That clamps, and that's a sort of centre line, that cut out there, that clamps onto your workpiece that you want to make a sort of tenon in. Clamp it on. Yeah, they'd sort of move from position A to position B. So you'd be drilling 3 holes into the edge of the piece of wood. You'd shift it across and drill again, and you get overlapping holes for which you would have special beadlock tenons that you could put in. And it seemed great because you've got a bigger gluing surface with that kind of grooved tenon, but it is just not practical for production joinery. Now this is a honing guide for planer blades, so you clamp your blade in there, or in fact you can clamp your chisel between that slot there, and you let the blade stick out by the amount indicated. If you imagine you were honing it on a stone, it will keep it at a certain angle. You'll be able to just push it back and forth and get a nice good honing angle on it. Now also under here, collecting dust, I have a Craig square assembling table. These are I was going to say that was the Craig sort for that table. It's not actually, that's just a pocket hole clamp. Yeah, this is the sort. They come in 2 lengths. This is the sort that would work here. Do occasionally use one of these in our workbench over here. That's why I've put this Craig plate in the middle. You can clamp your workpiece down. Just imagine this was a workpiece. Not that you'd ever want to do that. There's another type of pocket hole clamp. Don't remember last time I used it. One of those things I thought, fantastic, I'll use it all the time. And then I didn't. I think because sometimes you think you need to rely on work holding things, but you actually manage just holding things tight with your hands until the screw goes in. It's a matter of experience and skill versus relying on unnecessary tools. That's a corner clamp. Same deal with that really. Don't use it much. Strap clamps in there, they're just something recently bought from Toolfix. I was going to use them for a hexagonal assembly that I did a test piece of, but the job never actually went ahead. Here's Alison and Isaac, wondering what I'm doing. An old Makita, very old Makita planer. Be interested if anybody knows how old this model would have been, what era. I love the styling of the graphics there. Did actually used to have one about twice as long. That one I mounted this way round by sort of routing out for the body, and I found a way to kind of secure it down, and I used it as an edge planer quite dangerous. I did have some dust extraction in the top. Here's a biscuit jointer. It was never much good. The adjustment screw here, which was for the height of the fence, was just a bit of plastic around this knurled, it used to be a knurled soft metal thing, and within a few weeks, as I remember it, it was losing its grip, so I then had to untighten and retighten that with pliers each time, so it always irritated me. So used that for a bit, but I was very glad when it finally broke entirely, because I had a great excuse then to get a biscuit jointer. No, sorry, not a biscuit jointer, a domino jointer, which was the right move, and I should have done sooner, because it's definitely been worth having. Now this old thing, the mortiser, one of those tools I got when I was doing more traditional type woodworking. Chose this, I thought it was well engineered, turned out it really wasn't. But you'd be clamping your piece, tightening that to hold it against this fence. Obviously wanting to do a perfectly straight down mortise, parallel with the sides of the timber, but the design of this thing is such that this fence, which is taking the force of holding that workpiece in place with a clamp, is only secured with screws into that piece and simply doesn't have enough bulk or rigidity to stay square, so you clamp against it and it goes like that. So your workpiece is going off square, which used to drive me mad. Mortising chisels would go in there. See if I can dig them out. If you're not familiar with this, might interest you. Oh, that was a very nice sharp 35mm drill bit that I'm glad to rediscover. Might stick that in the van. Still no sign of the mortising chisels, but there's a little bench clamp that comes in useful for small work every now and then. Usually the sort of thing I get out if I've got something to fix for my daughter, not in general work. Nope, no sign of the mortising chisels, so sorry I can't show you that. Router table depth stop, useful little thing. Old router, inherited from an old joiner as well, Hitachi brand. Well, that was a sort of a workshop tour, I suppose, wasn't it? Or skipping out some of the bigger, actually more often used machinery, which you can see here. If you found that interesting at all, then do comment. Thank you. Turns out these hedgehogs are pretty good at climbing, so I'm going to have to keep an eye on this one. I'm not quite sure what to do with it actually until someone comes to get it. It's not going out with the rubbish, just in case you're concerned. It's just where I put it temporarily. There is a local hedgehog rescuer called Anne, who I've left a message with, who I'm hoping will come and do something with it. If not, I better start reading up about what to feed it. I'll give you a name.